Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Intrigue the podcast, where we talk to people from different industries. Today, we are joined by Januik. Hello, Zach. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Raisa. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm excited to dig into your career journey. But before that, let's talk about your childhood. So where did you grow up and what kind of things did you like to do as a kid?
Yeah. So I grew up in Mountainside, New Jersey. It's a small town in like central New Jersey. I lived in the same place my whole life, same house, same everything. It was a small enough school that you go K through 8. So I always went to the same elementary and middle school until high school. And I did fine in school. I don't really even remember a lot of that now, but I like to play a lot of sports. I played baseball, tennis, soccer. When I was really young, I played basketball, but I was terrible at it. So I played a bunch of different sports, liked to do a lot of stuff outside. In school, I really liked like math, and that was really it. I didn't really like school that much, but math was my favorite subject. So grew up there, went to high school. I played, sports in high school. I started getting into like mechanical things like dirt bikes and ATVs and cars. And I think when we were 12, my brother and I bought our first ATV to do like snow plowing because we just.
Oh, what's an ATV for people who don't know?
An all-terrain vehicle, like a four-wheeler that, you sit on and ride like a motorcycle with four wheels.
Oh, wait. So you built your own ATV? Is that what you did?
I have, yes. We bought our first one. It was just some old like 1985 version that had nothing special, and just me and my brother wanted one. So parents told us, if you go and shovel snow, then you can go buy one of these. And then that's what we did. And then we started snow plowing with it, and that's kind of built up from there. So that's how we could get all the fun motorcycles and things that we wanted.
Oh, so your parents taught you like having a work ethic. Well, you have to work hard to get what you want, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. They were always there to help us out, but it was, if you want this thing, then you have to go and figure out how to get it and earn it and do that. So that was kind of we started that really young.
Interesting. So wait, how did you get started with mechanical things? Like, did your parents show you or?
It was, I guess, mostly my dad. My dad always had he always had an old car in the garage or, an old motorcycle. But I think it was more just, I think we were young. He got us a go-kart one year for Christmas, and then it just went from there. Like, it was just a small go-kart, but we kept breaking it. So we had to keep figuring out how to fix it, because most of the time, if it was during the week or in the summer, my dad was at work, so it would break, and we didn't want to wait until he got home to fix it and ride again. So we'd mess around with it and make it work. And then it just kind of built on from there. And, it was something that me and my brother always did together. So we always kind of figured that stuff out. We were into that stuff from a young age.
Oh, is this younger brother or?
Younger brother, yeah. But we're 21 months apart.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So growing up must have been interesting.
Yeah. It was, it was interesting for sure.
And then what did your parents do for a living?
So my father's an electrician, union electrician. So did that since he was young, like really young. And my mom ran a business out of our house. She did billing and then some office work for various different companies, but basically was doing work from home, in the 90s. So that was great. So she was always home with us. We got home from school. She had a nice flexible schedule. So she worked, but she was always at home. So that was great.
Did they influence you to, go after a certain career path, or can you explain?
Well, yeah. So my mom wanted me to be a pharmacist and go to school for pharmacy. I was not good at chemistry. So I said that was a no. My grandparents on my father's side were always like, oh, he's smart. He's going to be an electrical engineer, because my dad, my uncle were both electricians. My grandfather was a lineman, like a wire lineman for telephone poles in his earlier life. So she was just like, that's the natural progression. You're going to be an engineer. And, but my parents didn't really push me into anything. It was more just like, do what you like to do. And that was it. So, I don't know. I started getting into the mechanical stuff, and my parents' thing was, you can both go to college and we'll help you with your college. But if you drop out of school, then you have to reimburse us whatever of our money you spent to drop out without getting a degree. So so it was always like, if you're going to go to school, do something that you want to do, and graduate rather than go and not graduate and waste time and money.
Okay, so in high school, what were you thinking with regards to college, like major and location?
I was very nonchalant about it. I really didn't start thinking about it till like late in my junior year when everybody else was very much focused. And I was between like architecture because I wanted to go to school in Florida, and there was a couple schools in Florida I wanted to go to. And then I also wanted to do like mechanical engineering. I was looking at electrical engineering. I wasn't sure. It's hard to decide when you're in high school, right? Like I knew I was good at math. I liked physics. I like kind of building things, being hands-on with things, designing things. I took a lot of CAD classes in college. I took like electronics class. I mean, not college. I'm sorry, in high school.
Oh, wow.
Classes. I was in like all my electives were like woodworking or building electronics or designing things in CAD, and it was great. So I wanted to do something along those lines, and it pretty much landed me between architecture and mechanical engineering because in CAD we were designing like balsa wood houses and little fun projects like that. But then I also like, building engines and got more and more into the all-terrain vehicles and stuff. And I built one of my own with just parts, not from scratch, but, buy things, put it together, make them work. We used to find like old machines that were in barns that were sitting for 30 years and restore them, get them running, clean them up, and then ride them because they were cheap and it was fun and that was something to do. So it ended up being that I liked working on the mechanical stuff more. I went to school for mechanical engineering, and I kind of picked that at a drop of a hat and went to Rowan in New Jersey because it was close. And it was kind of like a last minute, like, yeah, okay, this will work. And I got into a couple of schools I wanted to go to in Florida, a couple of schools I wanted to go to New Jersey. And I kind of just said, I didn't want to make too big of a deal out of it. And I said, I'll go for mechanical engineering. I'll go to Rowan because it's 2 hours away from where I live.
Oh, so how was your adjustment from, high school to college, like academically, socially?
So academically, it was a little bit of an adjustment because I felt like high school wasn't super challenging, and I was in, decent classes, but I was never in like AP all the time, like advanced placement classes. So got to college, like the intensity level went up a little bit, but really it wasn't until maybe sophomore year, once you get through all those base classes, like the calculuses and stuff that I kind of had exposure to before, like the higher up maths, the higher up sciences. I had to take chemistry sophomore year, which I hated. But at that point, I started to realize like, okay, engineering is going to be a tough road, and now I have to really start applying myself to this. Socially was fine. I remember going to orientation, meeting people that I made friends with, and even one of those people was my roommate for 2 years, and came in and kind of knew a few people and kind of branched out from there. Once we got more, once I got out of sophomore year and you get more into your specialty with engineering, you kind of hang out with your group of engineers because all you're doing is work. So you're hanging out with people you're doing work with all the time. So that's kind of how like junior and senior year changed. I moved in with a couple other mechanical engineers, and we were just being engineers and doing stuff at college. That was kind of how it went.
Can you tell us more about like your mechanical engineer projects? Like what did you do in college?
So in college, Rowan University was great. They had a huge grant. We had a brand new building when I was there. This was in the early 2000s. So, 2005 to 2009, I graduated first with my undergraduate and 2010 with my graduate degree. But we had a full shop. We had water jets. We had lathes. We had all the things you could do. So all of our projects were centered around like design something on the computer that, we had to do like air compressors or Stirling engines, which are just a different type of engine than you would have in like your car or anything. It's very different. And we would design them, and then we'd go in the shop and we'd actually machine out the plastic or the metal, or we'd put it on a CAD machine or like a CNC machine and have it get cut out. So we'd be building these projects. And for example, the compressor would be a challenge of who can push the most air and create the most pressure. And it was great because all the things that I liked doing in high school, now I was designing and building it and then seeing how far we could push it before it exploded or broke or blew up or something. So it was, that was kind of right up my alley. I really liked the labs for the mechanical portion of building things. We built trebuchets 1 year to see who could throw. I think we were throwing I don't know if it was a tennis ball or a racquetball, but see how far we could throw them. And we were aiming at the music building. So that was, that was cool.
Oh, did anything break?
We didn't break anything, but we landed on the roof a couple times.
Oh my God.
So that was fun. You know, it's just like you get the whole class out there with everyone's home built war machines and you're trying to throw tennis balls. It was fun. But yeah, so that was, you know, the cool things we did in college, building those things. But then you get back into the high level math and calculus and advanced science and chemistry and physics and things like that, heat transfer, thermodynamics, where you get into the real more difficult classes. But you know, also interact with different chemical and civil engineers, and you see, and even electrical engineers, and how much really goes into that. We didn't have so much software engineers at my college. There was software and electrical engineering, but I don't think the focus was primarily coding for our electrical engineering course. I think that was there's a different discipline for that, but I wasn't really around a lot of that in college. But yeah, so I don't know, I thought it was a good experience overall.
Oh, how did you make the most out of it? Did you do like research or internships in college?
I did. One of the major projects I did that actually was the reason I stayed for grad school is something called Engineers on Wheels.
Oh, tell us more.
It was an outreach program, and we outfitted a couple of trucks and put some really cool stuff in it, like flight simulator, and set up some projects, like engineering projects for all the disciplines. And then we'd go out to elementary schools and we'd kind of demo what engineering was to kids to get them interested in it, so that we'd get more interest around engineering. And, you know, really in the United States, like engineering is something where we kind of, the number of engineers we have kind of slows behind like the rest of the world at this time, at least. And we wanted to get like some enthusiasm in engineering and kind of some knowledge around like what engineers do and some of the cool things and science projects and different demonstrations we could bring to kids that they would understand and really like enjoy, to get involved in either the engineering disciplines. So my senior year, that was a senior project where we set everything up. And then my graduate, that was my graduate project where I kind of led and drove that outreach to the schools and kind of determined which projects we were going to do and kind of what we were going to show, which was really cool.
I guess what challenges did you face like during the outreach and the project in general?
Relating to different kids of different ages, right? Some, you know, you can bring some really cool activities, and not all kids are going to like the same activities. So how do you cross those gaps? You know, you go to fifth and sixth graders and they love video games and they love, you know, whatever's the flashiest thing at the time. But that's not all of them. Some of them like to read, or some of them like to build different, or look at different things, or I forget even all the different activities we used to have. But, you know, like the civil engineering, like build a bridge with straws, like some kids love that. Some kids just aren't interested. So we had to come up with a wide range of activities that could really pique the interest of all different kids, of all different backgrounds, of all different, you know, interests. So yeah, that was the biggest challenge. And then also getting everything there with all of our people and the trucks and making sure everything fit and nothing broke on the way, and packaging and all that. So that was also fun.
Oh, so it was mostly like around social skills development. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'd say.
Interesting. So you said you went to grad school. Like, why did you go, and like, how did grad school help you?
So I went to grad school because I graduated in 2009 and jobs were scarce. So I stayed. And I'm glad I did, because it was worth it. It was one of those things where I didn't really want to leave college yet, and I wanted a master's degree. I knew I needed something. In retrospect, I got into mechanical engineering just because I continued on what I was doing. But a master's in business probably would have been better. But it was one of those things. I didn't want to leave college yet. Job market was a little slow at the time in 2009. And I had this opportunity with Engineers on Wheels to stay and keep doing what I liked. I liked working on that project. So I stayed and did another year. I did a summer, fall, and spring. So I did it in 3 semesters. And yeah, in retrospective, when I got out with my master's degree, I still didn't find a job right away. I felt like, even talking to some of my friends at the time, it was more beneficial to take the fact that you had a master's off your resume, because then companies wouldn't interview you because they felt like they'd have to pay you more at an entry-level position. And I had friends who had success doing that. And I said, well, I'm not going to take that off my resume because I earned that. And I don't want to do that. But you know, that's nowadays, that's not a thing that I don't feel like has to happen anymore. But I don't know if that much changed. I just know at the time that's what we used to talk about was, hey, is this really helping on my resume, or are people not interviewing me because of a master's degree that potentially would cost the company more money?
And like in terms of the education, like what did you gain from your master's?
It was just more, I got to go more into some of the peripheral engineering classes that I didn't get to do through my 4 years, more the advanced level. I think I did like some automotive engineering at a high level because I wanted to kind of get into that because that was my main interest. So it wasn't, I got to explore more of my specific interests rather than the gen ed things I needed to get my original degree. And I think I did like astrophysics, which was great. It was just like learning different ways that you can apply mechanical engineering. But my goal in my master's degree was I want to do something in the automotive industry, and I need to be at least have some baseline knowledge of automotive engineering and how that process works, just to get into that industry. So that's kind of what I focused on in my master's degree. But I didn't actually end up working in the automotive industry. So
You did, right? Eventually.
But not from a mechanical engineering perspective. And I guess we could talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I ended up, that it was worth it. I enjoyed it. But like I said, if the master's of business probably would have been a better avenue than just a master's in mechanical engineering.
Oh, tell us more. Why do you think an MBA would be a better investment?
Only because I feel like that's a lot of, I feel like, in my opinion, it's more helpful to get more of like a management level job or get more into the business side of any company, right? Learning more of how accounting and billing and cost versus, cost analysis and everything that you would do with a business degree, like how a business works and how you profit versus loss works and all those different things. And like I said, I never actually got an MBA, so I don't even know all the specifics that you would learn there. But, just from being an engineer to being like an engineer with extensive business knowledge could be more valuable. At least.
Would you recommend getting an MBA straight out of undergrad or like having a few years?
Probably not. You probably want a few years of experience to see what direction to go in. I think that was the most helpful thing for me, was getting a few years under my belt in any industry, not just coming out of college, because you don't really know what to expect. You come out of school and everything's new. So careers take you different paths, and maybe you might get your MBA right out of school and never use it. And you might start a job with just an undergraduate degree and say, oh, I can do continuing education that's more specific now that I know what I want to do, rather than just based on a degree just to have it. But that's what I mean. Looking back now, from what I know working, I should have gotten an MBA. So waiting is probably the better option, just to get that perspective on your own. A lot of what I did in college was based on like, oh, so-and-so does this, or so-and-so said this, or just like how other people, people I knew that graduated a couple years before me, this is what they're doing. And, you make the best decision you can with the information you have.
Okay. So tell us about like what job you took after your master's.
I didn't really take any engineering job. I came out of school. I graduated in the spring. I took the summer off. It was about 4 months. And then in the fall, I started working as an electrician with my father, my brother, and my uncle. So I did that for a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Tell us more about that. Like, what did you work on? And like,
we used to work in retail space. So they work in some malls in New Jersey. They work for a company. And I had always done like little summer internships with them. And I would always follow my dad around when we were younger and go to work with him, my brother and I both. And so I was familiar with like what electricians do, how electrical work is done, and how to read plans and put up lights and run wires. So his boss at the time said, yeah, you can come work for us for a little bit as summer help. You can, for a few months, and it ended up being almost 2 years. But, retail stores, planning out wiring, putting up outlets and lights, and in some of the malls where it's more of these fancier stores where you have like these fancy chandeliers and all this cutting edge technology and lighting technology and things like that, display cases. So we did all that. Like I said, my whole immediate family are electricians. My uncle, my brother ended up getting into that. My dad does that. My dad and uncle are both retired now. But Yeah, I did that for a couple of years. I kept kind of looking for jobs on the side, worked with a couple recruiters, and just really didn't find anything that was more interesting to me or honestly paid much better than what I was already doing. But, after about a year, I was like, I really don't want to keep climbing through ceilings and going to work at 4 o'clock in the morning every day and, things like that. So 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I started kind of looking more seriously, and I ended up finding my first job as a QA analyst at Harman International.
Cool, congrats. But before I talk about the QA side, let's talk more about the electrician side. So you said you woke up at 4 a.m. Was this like every day?
Yeah, Monday through Friday. They usually start at 6:30. So, and it was about half an hour away. So I wake up like 4:30, take a shower, get ready to go. If I left by 5:30, I get there at 6 and start working. Sometimes we start a little later. Sometimes we work on Saturdays. But it was, you'd go in early and you'd leave early. So we'd be done by 2 or 3 o'clock. And that was really great because you come home and you still have daylight and part of your day. And I enjoyed doing that because, I was in my early 20s. I could still get home at 3 o'clock, maybe go see my friends or get some things done around the house or, whatever I wanted to do. There was still part of the day left, especially when it was nicer outside, spring and summer. It was great. But the work, could I have done it forever? Yeah, probably. But, it was just not what I enjoyed.
And like your work, did you do it in like new retail stores or like, can you tell us more about like the nature of the work?
Yeah. How to explain it? So they were all like these new, basically some of these malls have a rule that every so many years you have to refresh your whole store or they go out of business and some new store comes in. So it would usually start with some store in a mall in Short Hills or Bridgewater, somewhere went out of business or decided they're not going to renew their lease. And the electrical company would get the contract and you'd go in and a different company would come in and demo out the whole store, all the shelves after all the product was out and demo it out to just no sheetrock, just the studs and a concrete floor. And then we would come in and put in temporary lighting to light the space until the next company decided what they were going to put there. And then once that happens, they bring in plans and we'd get started and go pick up all the materials, get different lifts, ladders, whatever we need to do the job, and start wiring up the new store based on the blueprints. The blueprints would say, we need lights every so many feet in the back. We're going to have a separation wall here. We need charging. We're going to have a cash register over here that needs outlets and different things like that. So you'd start, retrofitting the space with all that electrical stuff that's needed, like lighting in the ceilings, but you'd have to do that in stages. You'd have to run wires out to that location and back to an electrical panel. So you had power out to each location that you needed to start building out for switches or lights or like display areas or shelves. Sometimes everything had to be run through the floor. So if there's a concrete floor, you'd cut up the concrete and run piping in there, really, and set up basically your infrastructure to start running wires out to places for electricity. So everything has to be connected. Then once that's done, the next steps are bringing in the individual lighting, which is usually just a box that goes in the ceiling that you put those wires in, and then some kind of connector that connects to the box so that the lights can hook up to it later. But it all has to happen in stages from running the initial piping and the infrastructure and then the wires. And then you're working with other teams of like woodworkers and guys with tilers and guys who put up sheetrock and do spackling and painting. And you have to trim out at different levels at different time periods and make sure you're keeping up with everyone else on the job. And I guess once you start progressing through, you have all your wires run in, and you have maybe the sheetrock guys come in and carpenters come in and they put in some more walls or they put up the sheetrock, and then you can come in and put in like outlets or the actual light fixture, and then they'll come in and paint and do the next step and put in the floor, and then you have to come back in and put in the trim pieces and make it all look pretty. And it's kind of like, it was like the first initial stage of working with different teams of people and trying to coordinate and plan your time and plan your schedule. There was a what they call a superintendent on the job that would try to put all this together, make sure that all the teams showed up when they were supposed to show up, and some things had to be done at night, some things had to be done during the day. So how they scheduled all that together was kind of like my first experience into that, planning and execution workflow.
Were you involved in the planning phase, or were you just executing at this point?
No, I was just executing at this point. So I was more of like an apprentice almost level. I would just say, hey, I think, my working with my family, they'd always be showing me, and I'd be learning like the plans and how everything's set up. And, after a few months, I could do a lot of the stuff on my own. But most of the time it was, this is what we're going to try to accomplish today. If we accomplish this today, we're in good shape. And then we'd go out, we'd work for 8 or 10 hours or however long it took us to accomplish that. And then that'd be it. And then the next day we'd come and try to accomplish something else.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that experience, you gained a QA job at Harman International. Can you tell us more about what the company did and what you did?
Yeah. So the company, at least my division, was responsible for OEM infotainment. What an infotainment system is if you've ever driven a car that has a screen in the dashboard that's all powered by a little mini computer that lives in the dashboard of the car in most cases, that controls your radio, your navigation, when you connect your phone or your CarPlay or your Android Auto, and your heads-up display that shows you your speed and how far you are from places and running navigation and things like that. So my company was responsible for, or Harman was responsible for, not only creating the hardware, which I wasn't part of, but also developing the software that runs on all of these little computer infotainment systems. And my job was to quality test the software. So we would get builds of software pretty often, daily basis, and go through different lists of test cases. And I'll get into more kind of specifics about that in a minute. But we work with different OEM suppliers like BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Jaguar. We had done Tesla projects. Our big contracts in Michigan were Chrysler and Fiat and GMC. But my office was a satellite office where we mainly focused on Audi, BMW, and Mercedes. And basically you go through these 2 or 3 year cycles of Mercedes is coming out with a new line of cars. They need a new infotainment system, bid a contract would get awarded, and then the software development team would start designing and building software for those units. And we would get involved very early on from the QA perspective. As soon as those units are started, there'd be like a demo or what's the word I'm looking for? It'd be like a early sample prototype that we would get where we could start doing some testing on initial software. And we'd have to work with the software team, work through the requirements, create all the test cases, see if we could create automated test cases, and start working through the software development cycle where we worked in the waterfall cycle.
What's a waterfall cycle?
So a waterfall cycle is iterative development where you have a list of requirements and you just kind of iterate and work through the waterfall until you accomplish all the goals. And that's probably a terrible description off the top of my head. But when you talk waterfall versus agile is very iterative, like a 2-week cycle. And then the next 2 weeks, you can iterate and change what you had last time. You don't need a full set of requirements. They can kind of evolve. Waterfall is you set and define strict requirements, and then you develop to those requirements.
Wait, is it necessary for like car systems to use waterfall versus agile? Can you talk about like the trade-offs?
I don't know if I'd be the best at talking about the trade-offs, but I don't know if it was necessary. It wasn't up to us at the quality side. Our software team determined that in Germany, and that's where they were located. But I know I think with the automotive industry, the linear breakdown of waterfall was helpful because they needed to have certain deliverables, and this was defined by the customer in the beginning of development cycles. So it wasn't something where we weren't building a product for a potential customer. We were building a product specific to that customer's needs. So that customer would say, I need 1 through 100 of these features, and this is how I need them to work. And you can have some freedoms with the UI and things like that, but the user interface, but we have a defined look and feel in our cars, and that's what you have to build to and you just have to add this functionality in based on the technology that you have. So it was more of a waterfall kind of made more sense because we weren't really changing the specs or the requirements on the fly. We were trying to meet a specific set of goals. Where in Agile, you're trying to build something to customer needs, multiple customer needs, where there's going to be maybe multiple companies that might have interest or purchase or use that software. So your requirements might be more iterative. They might change based on feedback. They might change based on the customer needs changing or time or effort or things like that. So I feel like that's kind of the main, not the main difference, but why waterfall kind of made sense in that use case.
And then can you tell us more about like how you went about writing test cases? This was your first QA role, right?
Yeah, there was a learning curve. Basically what I learned was if you go through the requirements, and then we actually had some ISTQB, which is a testing training school that we went to get certified when I was working there, which was great. But really we have a requirement. A requirement is one successful use case. But start thinking about every way I can break this, right? How can I make this not work? And I'd create test cases around the successful use cases and all the variables, right? And then how could I possibly break this? What if I entered some weird information or some negative values? Or what if somebody just comes in the car and starts smashing on the touch screen? What would happen? Like there's as many different random negative use cases as you can think of. You'll never have 100% bug-free software, but if you can come up with as many use cases as you can cover a lot of the major underlying problems. So I would just kind of go through and really make test cases based on the requirements. And then once you're in there and testing, you can say, oh, maybe I did some workflow putting a couple of these requirements together and it broke. So let me jot that down, make a new test case. You can once you're getting further into the development cycle, you can start connecting different features together. So in these systems, we had tuner, which was AM, FM, or Sirius XM, and navigation. But in your initial requirements, there's not a lot of information that says how they should work together, right? Just we're going to make these specifications for navigation, these specifications for the radio, and then you have to get into, all right, somebody's going to use navigation and the radio at the same time. So how do we create test cases for that? We have to go through the UI. We have to go through the requirements, see if there's anything there, and really just break it down step by step, button press by button press, because you can have different types of controllers. There's different options in the user interface. You can go to a menu, or you can go to a sidebar or a top bar, and it's just, okay, sit on a page, and what are all the options of where I can go from here? And what could happen? Could it crash? Could it freeze? Will it go to a page that I'm not expecting? Will it do nothing? So kind of just sitting in a car or on a workbench, and we had these test benches, and going through all those iterations was kind of how I learned how to start creating test cases.
So you had like a table, I guess, of like expected results, and like you wrote what actually happened. And then what happened with those results? Did you send it back to the developers?
Yeah, so that would be once we started finding issues or bugs or even like feature improvements or enhancements, we had a separate ticketing system that was just internal where you create a ticket. And that was kind of the biggest part of the job was, can you make a well-worded, easy to understand bug ticket that the developers can get that and say, oh, okay, I know what they're looking for. I know what the issue is, or I understand the workflow. So
how did you do that? Like write a detailed and like easy to read bug report?
So it's difficult, but the best way is we create a template where we say, okay, we have a title, a description, what was the test case ID, because we had all these test cases stored in the database. What did I do? What was the expected result? What was the actual result? Very clear cut. Like here's what we did. Here's what happened. Here's what was supposed to happen. And pictures, videos, audio recordings, anything like that that's a visual aid is kind of how we would get all that information across. Because not only is it writing a good ticket, but there's also a language barrier. All the people we worked with were in Germany, and they all spoke English, but their natural language was German. So now they're reading a ticket in English as a second language, and you have to make sure that it's as clear as possible. And also constant communication. You're on calls all the time, talking with the developers, showing them, you can reproduce things on, through Google Meet or whichever web meeting you're doing. So many different ways to, communicate and work through those issues. One of the major things we did was go on test drives, and that was kind of where we find a lot of our issues is in the field. So we'd have cars that had these prototype systems built into them, and we'd literally say, okay, next week we're going to drive from New Jersey to Boston or New Jersey to Florida. Or I've done drives from San Francisco to Oklahoma City or San Francisco to San Diego. And, you just take these cars, everyone joins from all the stakeholders, the developers, the QA, the customers, engineers, and you go on with 5 or 6 cars and you drive 1,000 miles and you record what's happening and how it works. And, the load in a real world scenario is so different from what you would see on a bench in a simulated workspace. And all these cars were specially built cars, prototypes with logging for the CAN and most and all the automotive systems. And you could take triggers and pictures and screenshots, and it would all get saved to a huge hard drive in the back of the car. So we would just drive and test different situations, highway and city and different countries, go to Canada. And I think that's what really kept me in the role for so long was, I was younger and I got to travel all over the country and test these cars in different places and test this cool software and really be involved in like that development process. And once you see those things go live and, you can go to a BMW dealer and see infotainment system that I worked on. Like I thought that was really cool.
Oh, awesome. Can you talk about how your role evolved? Because you eventually became a test lead, right?
Correct. So I started in 2012 at this job, just as a QA tester. And I became got promoted to senior engineer after a couple of years, just from testing, doing more, and then a team lead where I would be leading the whole test process for certain projects, 1 or 2 projects with, 3 to 4 people that were working under me at any time. And what that would be is kind of guiding the team on what and how to test, kind of defining what the testing would be for that week, what the priorities were, meeting with the management team, the software management team in Germany, and just kind of laying out the roadmap and looking at like what was coming up, what are our most highest priority issues, managing that priority list and validating things. The biggest thing is validation. So we need to prioritize validation. We need to prioritize releases. And that's, as a test lead, that's kind of what I managed was the day-to-day priorities and what was the focus, and then delegated that down to team members who could go out on a test drive and confirm those things or test in the office, depending on what the issues were and how we had to reproduce them, or even if there weren't any heavy priorities or top, urgent matters that needed to be handled, what can we do in the meantime? Well, we have a new software build. Let's go test some common scenarios that we know to break this. We never really had an off day. We had to keep testing. There's always so much to test. So as a test lead, it's like, let's keep the focus on what we're testing. Is the priority issues that we need for release, or if we're just getting new software builds, or we're doing our daily testing, weekly testing, what can we do to exploratory test to find new issues? So you're planning and organizing all of that work for your team to make sure that you're delivering the best possible product.
How did you go about prioritizing what tasks to work on?
It really was based on timing, right? So if we had a release coming up to a customer and that, you have those priority list of issues and how severe they were, the severity is determined between QA and the development team, but you can say, if something doesn't work and we're fixing it, then we have to prioritize that because the customer is going to want to see that works. We had to provide a list of all current issues to the customer on a weekly basis, what progress we're making, status updates. So a lot of that, the priority would be driven from the customer too. They'd say, well, we see your 50 issues and we see your top 3, but we don't think those are the top 3. We think it's 5, 6, and 7. So we'd rather you focus on that first. Or the software development team would say, hey, this is more complex. We want to validate this first because there's dependencies here. So let's do that. Or just based on, the priority of the issue. If it was a user interface or customer facing issue, or if it's a background issue, or it would be a detriment to the person driving or something like that. And we prioritize based on how severe the issue was in the timeline. And, a lot of stuff, sometimes you get in field issues, like a customer was driving in a current vehicle and found this issue, and now their car won't turn on, or their screen is off and they don't have anything to see. So things like that would take highest priority first.
Mm-hmm. And how did you go about mentoring like newer or younger team members?
So my strategy was always just like work with them and try to show them like, hey, this is kind of what I would suggest. Everyone has their own ways to do things, and some people work better under their own ways than others. So it's more of like make suggestions of this is how we like to test. This is how we like to write test cases. This is, our test case structure has to be pretty much the same, but how you execute them is up to you. And that's kind of in QA, you don't want everyone to have the same mindset. You want different approaches to testing. You want everyone to work differently to hit different angles of the software. If everybody does the same test over and over in the same flow, you're not really going to find a lot of differences, a lot of variations in what could possibly go wrong. So it was just mainly mentoring, and this is the structure of a good test case. Here's the structure of a good ticket. I encourage you to work on the wording of your ticket and managing how you're writing things, and really think about who's going to read it, what your audience is, and how they'll be able to understand it. But then past that, I want you to explore and find things that I haven't found. Do it in the ways that I'm not telling you, and come up with your own way to drive somewhere and test, or sit here and test in different flows, because that's what makes all the difference. You don't, when you're doing QA testing on software, like with the user interface, if everyone tests it or looks at it the same way, then you're not really finding cases that maybe some other person would. There's a difference between like a power user and someone who just drives their car to work and doesn't really know how anything works. Like we found that we've tested for like 8 hours straight on repeat, nothing went wrong. But the customer who drove 3 hours and didn't touch anything caused a crash for some reason, because whatever that screen was doing had a memory leak or something, and it crashed. So there's so many different things that can happen. That it's just, I just, as long as you're interacting with the system or coming up with different ways to test the system, then that was great. And just kind of building them to say, join some meetings, get exposure to talking to software developers and engineering managers and stakeholders, and come out to Michigan, where our home office was, and meet everybody there, get familiar, and just kind of build your own relationships and learn, how the ins and outs of the industry that they're working in.
Wow. So lots of good advice here. Did you do some coding like in this job at all?
Not specifically coding, but we had to flash through Linux. And that was, to me, foreign. Coding was never something I was good at, enjoyed, or knew, or could really figure out. But really just Linux commands for downloading and installing different packages onto these infotainment systems, and using a command window, and that was all new to me. Extracting files and different file compression formats I had to learn. So for mechanical engineering, that was all new to me. So that was kind of like my introduction to code and like technical software development.
And then what other aspects of the role that you haven't touched in this conversation? Like, did you have to hire people, like interview people?
I did interviews. I wasn't responsible specifically for hiring. My manager at that job did that, but we did interviews. I was responsible for like the facility, like our office, because there was only 12 of us. It was a very small office. So like if something broke, I would always be the one like, oh, I'll fix it, or I'll call somebody to fix it. Or I managed like, oh, the garage door broke, I'll call somebody, or oh, the sink is leaking, call somebody, or stuff like that. So I was kind of also doing the facility stuff. Other guys had different responsibilities. It was just a very small operation. We were a very small satellite office, but that was really it. I traveled all over to meet. I went to Germany to meet our colleagues there and some customers. Um, I had to work with some teams out of China as we were trying to look into some of the Chinese market vehicles they wanted to bring over. So we kind of worked with them on how we would test and validate all the software they were building here, which never really happened, I think, because COVID hit. And then, even before COVID, I think the economy just kind of didn't work out for them. But yeah, so I would travel around and just kind of like meet different people, go and travel and test, and yeah.
Any advice on like building relationships with different cultures and collaborating with a lot of people from diverse cultures?
Yeah, I really at the time didn't give it that much thought either. I just was kind of like myself, tried to be professional, respectful, and not like, not come in, you can't come in anywhere overconfident. Like, hey, I'm new or a guest to all these places. So I'm trying to just be myself and be willing to learn and listen. But that would be the best advice, is just because you're always nervous in these new situations. It's really hard. If people tell you, I'm traveling to a foreign country that I've never been to before to meet colleagues, like it makes you nervous. But it's just, really, hopefully you're working with good people like I was, and they make you feel welcome. And after some conversations, you feel a little bit more comfortable and you feel like you can fit in and really get a good, productive conversation about the work that you both share or you all share,
So being open-minded and like having a learning mindset.
Yes, absolutely. Learning mindset is key anywhere, anytime.
Awesome. So like you moved on from this role to a product owner role, or at the time it was project management, right?
I was still product owner at the time.
Okay. Can you tell us more about like why that happened and how it happened?
So in 2019, our satellite office got closed down, and I was given the option to move out to Michigan, which I didn't want to do. So I stayed here, and our whole office got laid off.
Sorry.
Except for one person. That's okay. We all, it was a bit of a surprise. We kind of knew it was coming. We had the feeling the company was downsizing. We figured we were expensive for 12 people in an office in New Jersey. But it happened. It was probably like the most fun I had I worked there for 8 years. 7 years. But you work with the same 12 people every day for 7 years, and it's like you're working with your friends that you're going to work with every day, and we're just like, okay, and I'm still in touch with all those people today. But it's just one of those things where we're like, okay, this is too good. It's probably going to end soon, and it did. And so I remember they told us in April, and we had until the end of June. They gave us a few months before they closed it down. So we went through like April to June of closing everything up and started looking for jobs. And what was in my wheelhouse at the time, I was a QA engineer for automotive infotainment. There wasn't a lot of that out here. And so I kind of opened up my search to see okay, maybe QA engineering and other things. I looked into mechanical engineering, but I was already 7 years into a career in mechanical engineering and basically have to start over. And I think one of my colleagues at the time sent me over the Trimble job post for product owner, and I had no idea what a product owner was then. And I said, well, okay, that's cool. They do navigation and transportation, so that's kind of similar. So I kind of researched what a product owner was, and I said, well, I don't know. I know what Agile is, but I've never worked in Agile before. That was the main requirement, was you have to know Agile. You have to have experience in navigation or technology.
Which you did.
Which I did. And I said, okay, let me apply for that. I applied to some other jobs and different roles in QA and things like that. Nothing that I was really interested in. And then I remember, I think in June, I got a call from our recruiter at Trimble Maps, and that we did the initial interview. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. It sounds like a really cool job. I didn't really know what products I would be working on or anything like that. But I was like, I'll keep an open mind to it. It's right in Princeton. I can stay in New Jersey. And I think the interview question was like, can you tell us in your own words the steps you would take to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich? And I was like, okay. I was like, you mean like a detailed And I went on for like 20 minutes about how you could make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich step by step. And she was like, yeah, I think you'll fit in here. I'll forward you, your resume forward, and you'll get a call from the hiring manager. And I went through the interview process. I met with, I actually had a phone interview and then an in-person interview, and ended up getting hired as a product owner, which I was happy about. And I guess any other details in that process, I think I got the offer letter 2 days after I officially got laid off. So I was like relieved.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So
what did you know about the product owner role at the time?
At the time, not much, to be honest. And probably, my hiring manager would probably be mad at me now for saying that. But I did some research on my own, and I said, okay, so we're in Agile. I know Agile is 2-week sprints. Software development, I knew nothing, other than the QA aspect. I don't know, like, the process of architecting or REST APIs were a little foreign to me at the time. So I started doing research into that, kind of educating myself before I got started. I kind of wanted to take some time off, because how often between jobs do you get to have some relaxation with no stress or no work or nothing to think about? So I was able to start at the end of August 19th, I think was my start date. And so I had off from the end of June until the middle of August. So I got to enjoy my summer. I had time to do my research, look into what I was going to be doing, kind of get an idea of the role in general, and just see, like, I didn't know what I was going to be working on. One of my interview challenges was, why don't you drive home with Copilot? And they gave me a license for Copilot, which is our navigation app, Trimble Maps, and give me some feedback. Give me 5 things that are good, 5 things that are bad, and any bugs you find. And I sent an email about that. And I was like, okay, that's in my wheelhouse. I'm used to testing. I'm used to driving with navigation. I was like, I could really work on something like this, but I didn't know what I was going to actually be working on when I got there. But yeah, so I was excited about it. And when I started on the 19th, I started working on a product called Mylon, which is a driver trip planning app. And it kind of just continued on from there, learning about the product owner role. Now,
how did you transition to the PO role? Because it was new, right?
Yeah, I was frustrated, to be honest, for the first 6 weeks.
Oh, why?
I felt like I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, right? So, and I had help. I had some great people working with me and helping me, but I always felt like, it doesn't feel like I'm doing the right thing, or am I really keeping up with what I'm supposed to be keeping up with? I just wasn't sure. Am I missing something? So until I really got the hang of the flow of, the sprint planning, the backlog grooming, what the backlog actually was, what the priorities actually were from the stakeholders, and what the goal of the project was, I felt kind of lost. And I would talk to other people, and a lot of people helped me at the company to help me understand, like, what was going on. And it was just like, I guess the best way to put it was like getting my head into it and wrapping my head around everything that was going on. So it took about, I'd say, 6 weeks to really get a little more comfortable. And then probably almost 3 total months to be like in the swing of what I was doing.
Like, what would you have done differently if you had to start over again?
I don't know. And that's kind of what I've been asking myself for new product owners to come in, like, what can we do to make them more comfortable from the start? And so that's, for me, I don't think there's much I could have done differently. I think it was more just like, this is so new. There's a whole new world for me. And I just had to, like, take the time to familiarize myself with it. And while it was frustrating, I was learning new things every day and feeling a little bit better every day. And it's hard to put my finger on what could have been different. I think it was just so new to me that it was frustrating. Once I figured it out and learned it, I love it. Like, I love every day what I'm doing, and I'm challenged every day. There's always something new. But it took a few months to really get comfortable in owning the product. Being a product, you have to own the product. You have to be the voice of that customer, the voice of that product. And, to really own that, you have to know every aspect of it. And that takes time. I don't think you come in on the first day and say, oh, I really know what I'm doing with this product, when you've only been familiar with it for a day, you're doing kind of yourself a disservice because you don't really know what's going on yet.
How did you go about learning like everything about the product?
It takes time. I talked to previous product owners of the product. I talked to stakeholders. I talked to product managers. I went through the backlog. I read all the documentation I could find. And this is over the course of weeks, so it's not like you can just consume that much information fast. But just looking and finding and asking questions and communicating with people, and that's hard when you're in a new role because you don't know everybody. But you get introduced to a few people, and then it'd be, well, who do I talk to for this, and who do I talk to for that? And those are just growing pains at a new place. And I think some of the things that Trimble Maps does very well is get you into meetings with people, get you into introductions. Expose you to the people you're working with. And I feel like that's something that keeps improving. And as you know, we have a lot of documentation now for new onboarding for how we can really make people comfortable, get them up to speed and things like that, which I think is super helpful.
So I guess tips for like new employees, like you have to know who to talk to for what. Right. So you have like probably a list of things in your head, like, oh, for this, I have to talk to this person and this person.
Yeah, it's always helpful to figure out like who are the main people that you need to be interacting with, right? Like who are my stakeholders, and I need to go, and I'm new here, go introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Zach, I'm new, and great to meet you. We'll be working together, and just get to know people, and that's the way you're really going to get comfortable in a new place. I think it's difficult when, especially the last few years, people get hired remote. That's makes that bar of entry so much harder because you're remote. It's hard to connect with people when maybe you don't have a Google Meet scheduled with them yet. You can't just walk over and say, hi, I'm Zach, I'm new here. So I'd imagine that's much harder. But just for me, it's helpful to just go and talk to people that look at an email and say, oh, I see 4 or 5 stakeholders on this email, and I have a seat map, and I know where they sit. So let me go introduce myself, so people know who I am and why I'm here.
Also, do you connect with them at like a personal level, or this is like strictly professional?
I mean, you have to. I think you do connect at a personal level sometimes. It's just maybe not initially. Initially, it's a professional, like, hi, I'm the product owner of this, or I'm the QA engineer for that, and let me know how I can help, and what do you do here, and what are you involved in, and kind of get a picture of how everyone is working together. And that helps you know where your place is to start helping people, making changes, or improving what you're doing. I think knowing where the requirements came from, knowing the customers helped me a lot, because I could go in and say, oh, okay, I can go talk to this customer and see what they need, or I can go talk to the stakeholder and see what's been going on for the roadmap for this quarter. And that's once the roadmap was defined for me, that was where I was like, oh, I know where we're going, where we came from, and what we're doing right now.
Can we talk more about owning a product? Like, what does that mean? What does it look like?
Owning a product is basically being the voice of the customer to stakeholders and your development team. So owning a product is you're the champion of that product. You are the one who's primarily responsible for defining what would make that product valuable to people. You have strategy teams and product management who come in and say, this is the roadmap, and work with you on that. But you are responsible for executing the improvements and changes on that product. So you have to be the champion of the product. You have to communicate to the stakeholders who are asking for all different things. You have to communicate to the developers who want to know the value in the work that they're doing. You have to communicate to marketing who have to know how to sell what you're building. You have to communicate to a support team who have to support customers with the work and features that you're implementing. So you're just really the knowledge base for everything that product is. And you're hoping to spread that knowledge to everyone within the specific ways that they need it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can you explain the difference between product manager and product owner? From my understanding, like your role is more execution based, correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. Product manager is strategy. So every company and even industry does that different. So at least from my perspective, a product manager is someone who's focused on strategy. So what are the customer needs? Work closely with the product owner, talk to the customers, see what they need, what they like, what they don't like. Pre-product launch, get feedback. That's also a product owner will get feedback on the product and see where improvements need to be made. But in products that are launching or have launched, what's coming up next? The product manager should be looking at that long-term roadmap of here's our high-level goals and here's the benefit and value that we can add. And then the product owner will come in and say, those high-level goals are great. Here's some of the things that we're working on other customers with that are bugs or issues. Here's, we'll set a priority together and say, here's what the outlook looks like short-term, long-term, and here's why we want to prioritize this. Which customers need what, how many customers are we supporting with the features we're building, and prioritize based on that. The way I like to put it is a product manager is like a 3 to 12 month outlook, and a product owner is a 0 to 6 month execution.
Interesting. So how did you go about talking to customers? Or you still do it?
Yeah. So a lot of times customers will reach out to you when they have problems. You never hear from customers that are happy most of the time, but it's always good to connect with them. So this is something the product managers do on our side is have a lot of these contacts with our customers that we have good relationships with, and we'll reach out from time to time and say, hey, how's everything working? How can we improve? What's good? What's bad? Where do you think things can change? And you get a big picture, and then you start prioritizing, and then that's just from the customer conversations. Then you have customers who have issues or contact support, and then so you have conversations through that way where something's broken or something's not working how they expect, and you have to go through and troubleshoot with them, make sure that you have a solution that makes sense for them, but also doesn't impact any of your other customers in a negative way. So really, that's you initiate these conversations with them and through problems and good times. There's also conferences we go to where we can interact with the customers and do demos, and we have customer advisory boards to come and talk to our product managers and stakeholders and talk about what's good in the industry, what the industry needs. Look at what's coming up for the industry, and maybe not just for a specific customer, but the industry as a whole. What direction is the industry going in, and how can the work we're doing reflect that, or contribute to that, or add value to the industry? The industry impact and influence.
And then we have software developers. Like, how do you go about building relationships with devs and testers?
Yeah, so from there, it's and it's a different kind of conversation because there's a lot more technical discussion happening with the developers and QA, and so it's more of like, as a product owner, you're coming in with kind of general requirements of, hey, we need to build this, and the developers have to tell you how. The best way to get a good, I think, rapport with development is make sure you have all the information and it's clear. It comes back to like the tickets I used to write is clear and concise. Nobody wants to read paragraph after paragraph. We need to build something. It's a very specific use case. It might be complex on how we're going to build it, or there could be complexities throughout the process, but really just, hey, this is what we're looking to do. Can we do it? And how can we do it? And it's always a two-way street, right? Like conversations back and forth, productive discussions, being creative together. It's a collaboration. So I feel like the best way to keep those relationships good is to collaborate. No one has to be, I don't know. I don't think it has to be like this is what, we're just going to do this. It's a collaborative discussion on how to do something, and everyone gets a say. And I think that works really well when everyone has kind of that design and implementation mindset, and everyone wants to make products better. Just making sure we have that goal in mind, the requirements and the objective of what we're trying to do.
And then you mentioned you don't have like a coding or a technical background. Like, how do you go about, let's say, writing tickets or like talking to devs without really understanding what's going on?
It was so hard in the beginning because I'd write like a good description that did not jibe with anything that a software engineer would make sense to. Like I would write some regular description of like high level, hey, we need to do this, and why is it? It should be no big deal. And then the developer would read the ticket and be like, this doesn't make any sense in my mind because of how the technology works or how our products work. And it took me time to really get to that understanding at the technological level. And then once I kind of understood our architecture and the framework a little bit better, and I'm still no expert, but at least I can write tickets in a way that follow along with the architecture so that it's more clear for everybody on the team, from product owner to developer, to say like, hey, we're looking to accomplish A by moving B over here or C over here, or adding some new process here at a high level. And then the developers can come in and correct me and tell me all the ways that I thought about it wrong, but at least say, yeah, but it makes sense. We know what you're trying to do, and we can do it.
Oh, so you start out with like the layout, the architecture, and then you work from there.
Yes. Sometimes it's just, okay, we need to accomplish A and I have no idea how to get there. So please, development team, help me figure this out. But that's where you build new things and try building new and exciting things with new technology that I don't even know about. And that's where the engineering team is so valuable.
Interesting. And then like, who else do you interact with? Like marketing, like how do you go about talking to them?
Marketing. Yeah, it's just the same as any other stakeholder, really. It's, hey, we're giving advance notice. Anything you do last minute, you have to have planning in place to say, give these stakeholders time to react. Nobody wants to be told last minute that we need something that's going to take a ton of time and they're going to have to work extra time or extra hard to get it done on top of their other priorities. So I try to come to all stakeholders, marketing, support, everything, sales, with enough time for them to react. To the point of being a product owner is planning out by quarter, by year, and you should be able to estimate within a degree of safety, a timeline. And the sooner that you can reach out to marketing for a product or a change and say, hey, something's coming and we'll need some support, and really define what that is, the more receptive all these teams are to it. And so I try to give enough advance notice. I try not to put any burden on someone I wouldn't want on myself. So I try to think about it from my perspective. How am I approaching someone else to ask them to do something? If I ask myself the same question, would I react happily to it, not happily to it? So try to put yourself in the shoes of whoever you're making a request from, and do it in a way that isn't going to inconvenience them.
Okay. And then, let's say like in a development team, like someone tells you, hey, this isn't technically feasible. Like, how do you work with that?
Yeah. Then I say, let's figure out how we make it technically feasible, or what we can do. Like what can, if it's not possible, then that's something we have to go back and revisit and see what's possible. Usually if you're bringing a requirement to the development team, there's a good customer need for it. Anything can be built or possible. It just depends on the work or the
time, right?
Right. So it comes back to like, okay, it's not technically possible in the way we thought. So now we have to go back to the product team and determine that, is the effort worth the time, or is there a better way to do this? And if what we're thinking of isn't possible, then I always like to ask, what would it take to make it possible? Let's have an idea before we go back and try to revisit with the customer or revisit with whoever's requesting this feature and figure out, hey, listen, this is something we can do. Is there enough people who are willing to pay for it that makes it worth the extra 3 months of work that we didn't expect? If there are, then sure, we can do it this other, longer, more expensive way. But if not, is it something we want to prioritize? Is there other things we can do to accomplish this goal? But it has to be something that not only stakeholders agree with, but the development team. The development team says, yeah, we can do that, but we don't want to, it could be a hack together solution, or it may not work long term. That's not something that's scalable or long term reliable. So we all have to come together and figure out a solution forward that works for both our team and our customers.
Okay. So how do you manage conflict between, like, let's say, two different development teams?
So it's hard. Everyone has their priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the product level, you shouldn't honestly I don't think you should be unless you're managing both or working with both those development teams as their product owner. I think it should come more from a planning perspective, because development teams get their roadmaps. They agree on what, the scope of the work is and the time it'll take. If there's two development teams that have to work together, then the most prudent way is to go product to product and say, hey, we have some competing priorities. We have to discuss it from a product perspective and the game. And then that unified roadmap should come down to the development teams, where there shouldn't be any issues where the development teams are going back and forth, but product and stakeholders should define that priority and strategy at a higher level and define where there's crossover. And, really from there, once the development teams get the work, there should be no conflict, right? So that conflict resolution really comes at the product level, because other product owners have priorities, different teams have priorities. So the conflict resolution comes at, okay, what are our priorities overall? The product managers, product owners get together, and what are the value benefit of each, and how can we prioritize this together, or work on them at the same time, or see what our deliverables look like, or if we're too overloaded, what's going to slip, what is okay to push out further so that we can accomplish these more important goals. There's always 100 priorities, but which ones are the top ones, and which ones, maybe that conflicting goal doesn't serve the broader goal of everyone, right? So it might have to get pushed out until there is bandwidth, until there's time. So, that's a balancing act, but usually it's something that I think is handled more at the product level than it shouldn't have to be handled at the development level.
Interesting.
So
what do you like? Sorry?
I say engineering managers should be involved always, but, as an individual developer, I think, or as a product owner, you should be giving clean, understood, groomed work, estimated work to the developers, where any of the conflict of what's a priority A or B is already defined when it gets to that point.
So how do you build like an effective relationship with an engineering manager? Because you'll be talking to them a lot, right?
Yeah. It's just a mutual respect. You have to be, like I said, you wouldn't want to inconvenience anyone in a way that you wouldn't inconvenience yourself, right? So try to work with them, be patient with everyone, have good conversations. Personalities play a lot into it. But to me, it's just how you approach situations. It's delivery, right? It's instead, you can ask for things rather than talk about how they, instead of demand things, or delivery of the conversation, and how you can really play to different people's, personalities. If someone's stressed out, maybe it's not the best time to ask them for something new, or if, so know the situation, kind of, once you work with people, you get a little bit more familiar, but, keeping those relationships long-term is really important.
So what skills are required to become a successful product owner?
I would say time management, organization, persistence, patience. And, that's really it. I mean, for me, and it's time management is the big one, because not only are you managing your own time, but you're trying to make sure you're managing your development team's time properly.
And then you also manage multiple products, right? Can you tell us more of how you manage your time and you balance priorities?
Yeah, I guess it's more like, it comes back to what the strategy is at the high level. When the strategy is defined, you kind of know what the sector-wide strategy is, what the division strategy is, and how, what maybe your OKRs are. We have some high-level OKRs. What are we trying to accomplish at a high level? So then there's always an issue with competing priorities and competing strategies, but it's just really being able to manage that at a level where, setting expectations properly of, hey, this quarter we can only do A through F, and, based on the priorities that are set, these things have to push out because of bandwidth or one thing or another. But, communication and managing priorities is kind of the most helpful thing. Managing expectations is big, and communication. So not everyone's going to always be thrilled with the roadmap or the outcomes, but you have to be able to at least be honest and say, hey, we committed to this, but it's not going to happen sooner than later. Or, hey, I know this is something we really wanted to get done, but it's been deprioritized for something else. And it's better to communicate that sooner than let it go until the end. And I feel like that's kind of the biggest thing that I try to do is manage those expectations.
Okay. And then from a day-to-day perspective, like how do you manage your time? Because you have a lot of things, a lot of products on your plate.
It just depends on how the day comes to me. There's meetings and things like that always take priority. I make a list. I have multiple papers just littered around my desk right now, different lists of things. And I try to organize that into a priority list somewhere digital so that I can take it with me. But really, it's just I make a list of everything on my plate, and I try to prioritize it based on what I feel is more important or things that I can get done. If I have 15 minutes before a meeting, I pick something that'll take 15 minutes and just try to get things off the list. If I have a couple of hours, then that's maybe when I undertake the bigger tasks that I feel like I have to get done, or write a set of requirements, or create epics, or clean up my backlog, or anything like that. But it just really depends on how much time I have and what that list looks like. Always supporting customers first, right? Customer comes first. So that's always how I approach it. Sometimes you don't get everything done in a day and you have to just shut it down and take a break. But
have you always been good about, setting boundaries and I'm going to stop at this time?
I don't set a time to stop, but if there's nothing urgent or on fire, then I don't work until late hours of the night. I have to be home. I have, family and daughter, so I want to be there for that. So, if I work 9 hours, 10 hours in a day and I feel like I don't want to wrap something up, I'm done and I just walk away. And I try not to take any of that with me. I always have my phone for emergencies in case someone messages, but no, I try to disconnect and not think about work off hours and not overwork myself, because burning out is also a bad situation, because then even the hours that you normally work, if you're burnt out, you're not going to be productive.
And then how do you prevent burnout on your engineering team?
That has to be, to me, it's just, we try to keep, not everything's going to be interesting, but we try to vary what's being worked on and keep, I guess not let developers get stale in what they're working on. I try to keep, the tickets varying to some degree, but it's hard. It's based on how that engineer or developer feels. The development team has to, communicate, hey, I'm really burning out on this. Can I work on something else, or manage that? So that comes up, or PTO happens, or things like that, and it changes the product timeline or changes your sprint a little bit. But it's better that a developer would communicate burning out than work while they're burned out, and not maybe work at the same level or something that makes them unhappy or hurts their work-life balance. So it's just managing that communication too, making sure that you're aware that when you're doing planning or whatever, that developers are happy or pleased with the tickets they're getting, and not just oh, okay, I guess I'll do that again. So it's just communication and I guess trying to show the results of the hard work that's being done too. I think that helps.
Can you tell us more about, motivating developers? You mentioned telling them about the results.
See, and I don't know if I'm really the one who's actually motivating our developers. I feel like engineering.
Yeah, you are.
But engineering,
I've worked with Zach, by the way, for the audience. So.
It's just what we're building things that are super exciting at Trimble Maps. So if there's developers, the goal is for me to communicate what we're building is so cool and why we're building it, right? What's the big picture of this 2-day ticket that you're working on? It might just be some mundane thing like setting up a database or coding some API, but what's the goal? And I think showing the development team like what that end goal is, or when they're doing a demo to say like, hey, this is great and this is working towards this. And I think that helps, and really like seeing stakeholders react to the work that they're doing really gives motivation. But it's like, yeah, we did this small thing because now we can do this really cool thing that we're showing at this really cool conference, and all your work is being showed off here. So it's like these are like kind of just giving those goals and showing what the big picture is really, I think, helps. And you could probably comment on it too, how that, if it helped you. But yeah, it's just try to be like open with what we're doing. It's not, within the team, it's not a secret what we're trying to accomplish and why we're doing things. And if any developer or engineering manager or product team or anything that feels like it's not, not something they're interested in or something that doesn't make sense, then we try to just make sure that's, we can explain or talk about what that is and make sure they're at least in the loop on everything that's going on.
And then from working with you, I noticed that you're very hands-on with developers. Like, is that something you took away from like your years as a QA lead and like as an electrician?
I like being hands-on with stuff, like with all the things that we're building, because it helps me know it too. But also, as a product owner, you have to test your own products. You have to sign off on things. So I brought that in from my QA experience of testing the different things that we're building. I'm testing things much more advanced now than I ever did before. But even just being hands-on with the developers and being involved, if there's questions on the tickets or my requirements aren't good enough, it's a much better use of everyone's time if we work through it once than have to go back and do it again or multiple times because of unclear requirements or unclear tickets. So that's why I like to, if there's any issues, no matter how long it takes in an afternoon or a day or a night or whatever, sit down and talk about it. And is the requirement that we agreed to or groomed, does it make sense now that we're getting into it? Or did something change, or is the technology different than we expected? So it's always better to address that stuff sooner for the sake of time, everyone's time, than, come back to stakeholders 2 weeks later and say, hey, we worked on this, but realize that it just isn't going to work. And now we have nothing to show, and that's, to me, that's worse than taking a day to figure it out the right way after, we do our grooming and backlog and estimations. And there's always so many unknowns that the sooner you make those unknowns known, the sooner we make progress. And that's, how I try to approach it.
Wow. So from like your long career journey, like what transferable skills did you take from like electrician to QA to product owner?
From electrician, it was probably the work ethic of, there's no, you get one break, you get your coffee time and lunchtime, but like you just work and try to make the best of it, enjoy it, work, enjoy the people you work with. Work's always better when you like the people you're working with and are able to interact. We used to have fun with stuff like that. It was much less formal. It wasn't an office environment. So we could have a little more fun, just on the day to day. Brought that into the QA and, was really close with the people I worked there. Learned a little bit about technology and coding and software. And I think the software skills and kind of the testing and troubleshooting and finding different use cases, especially writing requirements as a product owner, is almost similar to writing test cases, because as you're writing requirements, you have to figure out, what if, are there going to be any dead ends to this requirement that we don't get to, or I have to figure out all the use cases that might happen in the requirements so that we can build it properly. And that's kind of what you were talking about. You come back to a developer who might not understand the requirements or something's missing, and you realize you missed use cases. Sometimes you don't always get 100% of the use cases and the requirements, but that's kind of, it's helpful to kind of have that view of like, okay, we're trying to do A, B, and C, but there's 100 other things that could happen or go wrong that we have to account for. I think the biggest thing, and this I took from college, is just I feel like I haven't used a lot of the skills I learned in college, but what I used was the ability to learn. I learned how to learn in college. So through every career I've had, college has taught me that, okay, I know how I learn things now. I know what I have to do. Some people like reading, some people watch videos, some people just learn from experience, whatever it is. I figured that out in college, how I can pick things up and apply it in my everyday work and life. And that's what I carry through everywhere. It's just, if I focus on something for long enough, I can learn it. And have the patience and the time that I know that if I commit myself to learning something, I can, because of like how I learned things in college. And once you get through college, there's nothing like more technically difficult in most cases than that.
Unless you become like a doctor or something.
Unless you do something way more advanced than I do, which is probably most people. But it's just I try to just apply that learning mentality of there's plenty of things I don't know, but there's nothing I can't learn if I try.
How do you learn?
I learn by being hands-on, and that's why I'm so hands-on. The more I go in and use APIs, the more I use a UI, the more I use a product, the more it just sticks with me in my head. So my experience and all those user flows and all the different things that we do is I have to try it with hands-on first, and I could read about it, but hands-on, I learned by physically working on it.
That's all great advice, though, because like not everyone has a linear career path, right? It's a matter of like how quickly you can learn and how willing you want to learn,
Yeah, and I'm on my third completely different career, and but there's not like you can still enjoy it. It could be completely different. It's not bad to start over, but as long as you're doing something you enjoy, if you get into something just to get into it, you might not learn because it's not exciting to you or not interesting to you. So it makes it harder. If I got into, I don't know, chemical engineering, I just would get fired. So I don't like chemical engineering.
Oh, so what's the ratio of like passion versus practicality for you in a job?
I'd say it's probably 60-40. And
practicality meaning like paying bills, like money and...
Yeah, practicality is probably the 60 and 40. Only because, in my opinion, I go to work because I can earn money. That's how I earn money to live in my house and pay for it.
Support your family. Yeah,
exactly. So that's like my responsibility is go to work and make money. But I've been lucky that the jobs I've worked in, I've never felt stressed out to go to work a day in my life. I've never felt like, oh, here's another day to wake up and go to work. Like I always enjoy coming to work. I enjoy what I'm doing. And I'd like to carry that with me forever if I can. I don't want to ever go to work and be like, I hate doing this. Why am I doing this to myself? And because I don't think that's what work should be. I think work should be something you're passionate about. Because if you're passionate about it, you'll be good at it.
What advice do you have for like young people maybe who hate coming into work every day?
Nothing's permanent. You can either find ways to enjoy your job, talk to your superiors and see what you can do to maybe enjoy it more, or maybe it's just not right. If you're really upset with where you're working, you're still working there. You don't have to quit, but you can always look around and see what's out there. There's always good opportunities doing something that maybe is not as much money initially, but something that you enjoy. It might be a better quality of life. It might be more enjoyable and really quality of life is more important than money, because if you don't have a good quality of life, there's nothing you're going to do. You won't have time to enjoy the fruits of all the labor and work you're putting in.
And then in my previous episodes, I used to ask, are you successful? But in this episode, I want to ask you, are you happy?
I am. I love my job. Yes. I am. I like what I'm doing. I feel like it's challenging. Am I successful at it? Sometimes, but I really enjoy doing it.
Awesome. So what final piece of advice do you have for our listeners who may be lost trying to navigate their career?
Just be patient and find what you want, what you enjoy, right? Nothing is final. Go to college, find something you like to do, learn how to learn, get the degree, and find a job. Your first job is by no means the thing you'll do forever. It might not be the last. It will definitely not be the last job you ever have. Jobs are great, but you can do whatever you want. You just have to look around for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.